If your team is disengaged and your culture feels cold, it's not an HR problem, it's a perception problem. If you want to scale your business without losing your soul, you have to learn how to see people differently. Welcome back to the Champion Mindset Collective podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Dahya. Today, I'm sitting down with a man who spent 3 decades of his life figuring out why some workplaces thrive while others feel completely hollow. We're talking about the human side of leadership, trust, and why seeing your people as priceless is actually the best strategy for growth. Scott Doggett is a US-based leadership expert, author, and founder of the National Academy of Leadership Development. With over 30 years of experience across globally recognized brands like Marriott, Hyatt, and Real Vision, Scott has seen the best and the worst of the workplace cultures. He is the author of Priceless, See People Differently, Lead People Better, where he champions a movement to restore the human side of leadership in a world of increasing burnout and disconnection. Scott is also the founder of the National Learning of Development Month, reflecting his deep commitment on helping people grow. Today, Scott leads global mission to rehumanize the workplace, helping organizations to move beyond just hitting targets to actually seeing the value in every individual. Scott, it's great to have you on the Champion Mindset Collective. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here with you, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Scott, I'd love to explore your childhood, your journey in life. How did you get here?
Yeah, I grew up in a very small town in the U.S., the northeast part of the U.S. in New England, and went to a really small school where my dad was the principal. And so really my earliest memories around leadership were watching him lead his faculty and staff on this campus. And without even realizing it, he really was my first role model for leadership and probably my inspiration for wanting to get into leadership and study leadership and now really dedicate my entire life and purpose to this field. So yeah, I grew up in a very small community and fell in love with service and decided to go into the hospitality industry and pursued that career and spent 30 years, like you said, in hospitality. I ran resorts and hotels all over the country for the first part of my career, and then found training and development about halfway through and kind of made a pivot and have spent the last about 2 decades training and developing people in the industry.
Wow, what a journey. And yeah, 3 decades of working in that space. Isn't it interesting that whenever I speak to people, they say that the greatest role model in their life has been their father. And it's so important that, for any child, that the father and the mother are there as role models to help them, see the world and train them to, I guess, to see the world in a different light. Now, Scott, you talk about seeing people as a priceless rather than just productive. So I'd love to know where that belief actually started for you.
Yeah, I think it did start with my dad and watching him with his faculty and the staff and the families and the students. And he always knew everybody. He knew their, not just at work, but he knew about them outside of work. And I feel like every weekend we were at somebody's house helping paint or put up a barn, or we were always, he was always serving people. And so I think that heart for service, and then along with my Christian faith, I think those two really were kind of that inspiration for seeing people as humans. And everybody has a story. And I think I learned that from my dad, and that people respond to that too. So his faculty, that I never think they ever thought of him as the boss. And he, in my recollection, I don't think anybody ever quit on him, because they loved the environment. He really created a culture. It wasn't about managing a school. He really created a culture that was really special. And I don't think I realized that until many, many, many years later, but it was something really special.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in that environment around what your dad was doing? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was like family. I think all the teachers, I mean, it was probably a little weird because it was a small community. And so I couldn't get away with anything as a teenager. It was a little rough because everybody knew me and knew my dad. But it was a family culture. So I really felt like these teachers were, a lot of them were like uncles and aunts and people that we still are connected with to this day. And so it was a very special environment growing up.
Yeah. Was there a moment that you realized that leading with heart actually produces better results?
Yeah, I think now going into my career, I had the experience of being able to work for many different leaders with many different styles. And in my book, I talk about my best boss and my worst boss. And if you look at those two people, they were definitely on two different sides of the spectrum when we look at leadership styles. One of them really saw employees as what he called inmates. He would always talk about letting the inmates run the asylum. And so he led through fear, and that was his philosophy. And, you worked for him and you did what he said. And that was kind of the expectation. The other leader, my best boss, she got to know again, not just at work, but outside of work. And she knew about our family. And she would come in and ask what she could do for us. And she was constantly asking, how can I advocate for you up at the executive level? And, what are your barriers and what can I do to make your life easier? And I never felt like I was working for her. Always felt like she was kind of working for us. And I'll tell you, those two examples, on one, I felt myself complying while I was trying to find an exit. And with the other leader, I really felt myself giving my all, and I would have followed her anywhere. So again, those two styles, I really think was kind of the light bulb for me to recognize, listen, these were two leaders. They both had goals. They both were held responsible and accountable for results. But the way they went about getting those were completely different. And so that, I think, was my first lesson, I think, in this type of leadership.
Yeah, and that happens a lot today, right? There's a lot of fear-based leaders out there, and I don't know. It just seems that it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I always say people don't perform their best when they're managed well or they're directed or right. I think people perform their best when they feel valued and they feel respected and they feel cared for. At least that's for me. That's how I've always felt. And
and
so I
empowered
think,
as well.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I came out of a corporate world back in 23 and 24, and what I noticed was that there was no empowerment. It was just like, do what you're told. And I really didn't enjoy that. It was like a local government and organization. Yeah. But, when I remember when I left, it's like so many people said to me, even though you weren't my direct manager, because I didn't have any direct reports, they said that, but the way you worked with us and collaborated with us was just amazing. And I said, thank you, you know. So I think when you treat people in a way that they feel valued, like you said, and also empowered, then and treat with people with respect as well, right?
that's it. If you want to get the most out of people, that is it. You want them to stay and you want to keep them engaged and producing the best results. That's the key, is to
Yeah,
treat them like a human being and not like a resource to be managed or a number on a spreadsheet.
yeah. And how did that shift in perspective change the way you showed up every day?
It really shifted the way that I've led many, many teams throughout my career. And the one thing that I really challenged myself to do was, as I look at people, whether it's the people that I lead or even the people in my personal life, what we do as humans is we put a label on someone when we see them. And what I found myself doing was, as I looked at a team member that on my team, I would put a label on them that was something other than a priceless human being. So it would be, oh, here comes my problem child on the team, or here comes my high performer on the team. And I'd get excited, or here comes my low performer. And whatever that label is that I would put on someone would influence how I treated that person. And the way that I treat that person is also the way that I make them feel. And what I notice, and what just connecting the dots, the way that you make people feel influences the way that they perform, which translates into the results that you get. And so what I did was I challenged myself to start telling myself and changing that label to say, Scott, every person on your team is priceless. They are a priceless human being. It doesn't matter about their performance, their title, their rank, their experience. None of that relates to their worth as a human being. So let's look at people based on their worth as a priceless human being, because that influences the way that then I not just see them, but the way that I treat them. And in return, right now, the employees feel seen and valued and respected, just like we just talked about. And the results that come from that are night and day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now we hear a lot about engagement and retention and problems in business. It's quite common, right? You say that it's actually a perception problem. Can you unpack that for us? What it looks like?
Yeah, so Gallup comes out with studies every year, and most recently, they globally, I think it's like 25% of the workforce is currently really engaged. Here in the US, it's about 30%. And so there is a lot of effort every year, organizations trying to solve this problem. And so there's literally billions of dollars spent every year on trying to figure out, how do we fix engagement? How do we fix turnover? How do we how do we fix this? And so a lot of money is spent on programs and systems, and we're solving the wrong problem because at the end of the day, it's a relationship problem. It's not a program problem because you could have the best recognition platform, you could have the best benefits, you could have the best communication. But if we're still not treating people based on that worth and treating people with that respect and dignity and humanity, then you're not going to get that response. You're not going to be able to engage that employee and get the results that you're seeking. And so to me, it is starting with how do we see our people and how do we even see ourselves as leaders? What is our role as a leader? Is our role to be served or is our role to serve those who are entrusted into our care? And I think that's where we need to start. And guess what? The beautiful thing is that doesn't cost any money, right? We don't need to spend millions and millions of dollars. I mean, listen, those programs have value. I don't want to say they don't have value. They definitely help support engagement, but they're not the thing that drives engagement. People drive engagement. Programs support it, but people are the thing that really truly drive engagement.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. So I saw that in the corporate world where you'd have these programs, you'd have people getting emails saying, hey, you did well and this and that. But it's really just it's just technology. People are not, there's no emotion behind it. There's no connection behind it. And what people want to hear is a manager come up or someone leader come up and say, hey, I really appreciate what you did there. And that energy transfer between human to human just changes everything, right? But when you get an email that says, hey, thank you, yeah, you do appreciate it. And then I used to see certain people always getting the same thank yous or recognition, and then other people who are working their butts off not getting that, right?
That's it.
Um, I feel that really those connections need to happen more and be more authentic and more organic in that sense as well.
Yeah, people are really not asking for another pizza party. They really just want to be seen, and again, valued and heard and all those things. And again, that doesn't
Yeah,
cost money, but it does require a change of heart and a daily reminder of again what your role is as a leader and the impact and the influence that you have on people and their performance.
yeah, 100%. Why do you think that we find it so hard to move away from the treating people like items on a spreadsheet? Because, especially when you're going through transitions and you're going through of a business and you're going through restructures and so on, it feels very much like you're just a number on the spreadsheet.
There's a lot of pressure, right? There's a lot of pressure for results, and time is finite. There is so many minutes in the day. And so I understand that. I understand the need to get results. And I'm not saying results aren't important, but it's how we get the results that is so important and that truly defines leadership. And I think for organizations that want sustainable results, for organizations that want to be around for decades to come, the realization is you need your people. You need your people to stick around. You need your people to be engaged. Right now, if you only have 30% of your workforce that's highly engaged, that means you have 70% of your workforce that is not. In fact, statistics will say 20% are actually actively disengaged and are doing harm to you right now. And so I get the need for short-term results. And I think that's what drives the wrong behaviors. I don't think there's a lot of ill intent. I just think it's the pressure to drive results. But even I've seen so many examples of scenarios, and you mentioned situations like layoffs, even like when you have to restructure and you have to go through layoffs. I've been through so many of those scenarios and have seen it handled very differently from different organizations. And again, based on how you see your people, you will handle those situations very differently. And the outcomes that come from it are, again, night and day. I had one organization that had a big layoff and they saw people as resources and spreadsheets, and they were looking at numbers and how do we get these numbers in line so that we can keep the profits going. And they laid off about 5,000 people on one day. And they brought people in groups of 20 into conference rooms with people from HR that these people didn't even know to hand out cardboard boxes. And that's how they let people go. I had another organization that saw people as priceless, that treated people based on their invaluable worth and with dignity and respect. And they also had to do a massive layoff for whatever reason. But the way they handled it was each leader handled it one-on-one, called their employees one-on-one and had those conversations and offered support and that genuine care. And I'll tell you, that second organization, when things in the economy came back, that organization was able to rebound like that. People were wanting to come back. They were still talking positively about that organization, even after they were let go. Whereas the first organization, those people weren't coming back. and they weren't talking positively about that organization in the community. So again, same situation, same decision had to be made, but the way that you see people, again, influences how you treat them and then the results that follow.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I've been through 24 restructures
Wow.
and 4 redundancies in my career, and every single one of those could have been handled better. Like, you basically get pulled into a room, you get given a letter, and that's it. And then if you've got questions, you ask those questions because you haven't got the clarity, because it's still, when you go through the consultation process, they're still trying to work things out, right? So you get feedback, and then most people know that the feedback's not going to go anywhere. And the funny thing was, in my last redundancy, which was in 2024, we get pulled in to a room and they're saying, this is what's going to happen. We don't need business partners anymore in the business, in the organization. We're going to use product managers to do this work. And it's like, okay, totally different roles, because product managers manage products, business partners are strategic and they're managing relationships. And so we went and we asked a question and we couldn't get the answers. We were like waiting a month. And so then we organized a meeting and we had a conversation. I asked a question and I immediately got challenged by the manager saying, "You're challenging me." And I'm like, no, I'm just asking a question for clarity on behalf of the team. And then the whole process was so badly handled. And the manager actually came up to me and said, you need to work out what you want. Stop worrying about your teammates. You need to worry about what you want. And I said, you know what? What I want in my life goes way beyond this organization, right? And I don't think she'd ever been challenged in that way before, because she was like, whoa. I said, those people are like family to me. So, and you're telling me to be a division of that? And the interesting thing was, it left such a bad, I guess, an imprint or impression on me that on my last day, I didn't even turn up. I literally handed my laptop to a friend of mine, a colleague who lives close by, and I said, I'm not coming in. And that was it, because it was just so badly handled. So I think, if people are not cattle or sheep or things like that, you don't just herd them out the door. I think there's got to be, you got to show empathy. You got to have those conversations. Then HR, I think, should be having exit conversations with every person to get feedback on their experience so they can actually make it better.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I don't see that happening, especially here in New Zealand. It's can be quite toxic. I remember the first redundancy, I bawled my eyes out. I cried. I was begging for my job. The second one, I was really angry. The third one, I was like, wow, what's the possibilities out there? And the fourth one was like, you know what, universe, you've just confirmed that I'm not meant to be here.
And this is what we're talking about. When we talk about humanizing leadership, it's about humanizing Anthony and knowing that when you have a redundancy, when you have a layoff, this is impacting people's lives. Like, a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, and something like losing your job is going to add a lot of stress. And so I think we have a choice. Leadership is so much about just choices in how we handle certain situations, how we communicate, how we just think about how we're going to handle that conversation when I have to let you go. And so I think if we can humanize, if we get to know people's story, we get to know people on a personal basis, it's hard to not want to handle these situations in a much better way.
Yeah.
In a much more humane way.
Yeah, Scott, like I was having this conversation with this lady called Shirley Sutton that was on the podcast recently. And I was talking about how each and every human being has gone through some level of trauma in their life. Whether you're in a school system or whether you're in a work system, we are expected to fit into a mold. Everyone has got to be the same. And you're just given commands instead of conversations, right? And you don't know what a particular individual is going through or what they've been through in their life. Now, if I've shared this with you, and I'm publicly open to share this, for me, my childhood was traumatic because at the age of 5, my parents separated. I got shipped over to India to a boarding school, which was crossed between army and prison. And, I jokingly say that I was in prison from the age of 7 for 6 years. And then that abandonment, rejection, no one loves me, no one cares about me story played out in my professional and personal life. For me, the job became a prison because the all I knew about was that barbed wire fences from the age of 7 weren't allowed out. So for me, a job became a prison. And in 2024, I went, I can't do this anymore. And that's when I decided to start my own business. But I think if people are treated in a human way, in a way where people can authentically show up. And this is the other thing, is that we're not allowed to show up as our authentic selves. So we continue to put masks on, and we just get further and further away from who we truly are.
And then we remain at 30% engaged in our workforce, and we are okay with that. And we've become complacent with this idea. And I'm challenging organizations all over this globe to say, you've got this opportunity to drive results like you have never seen in your lifetime if we can bring humanity into the workplace. And if we can challenge leaders to see Anthony for who he is, to get to know Anthony and his story, and to get to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are and what your goals are. Because when you do that, you can align that with the work. And again, the results that come from that type of environment are incredible. I've had the blessing of being able to work for one organization, a nonprofit that was led by an entire team of servant leaders. And it was the biggest blessing in my life for a short period of time. But the results that came from that organization, I've never seen anything like it in my life. The turnover
Yeah,
was the revenue per employee beat Google and Meta. And this was a Christian organization because of the way people were treated, the way people felt about being at work. They truly felt like they could be themselves and that they were seen and they were valued as a human being. Again, it doesn't cost money. It literally is just looking at you and saying, listen, we're all human beings. We're all priceless. It doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter what your performance level is. It doesn't matter any other factor other than you are living, breathing, and you have a story. And like you said earlier, everybody has pains and struggles. And when you get to know somebody's story, it is really hard not to love them and want to fight for them and help them develop and grow. And that's the key to great leadership, is when you can help people grow and develop and help them succeed, then everybody wins.
yeah, 100%. And I stand right beside you virtually, and I'll back you on this as well. So yeah, and I was talking to another podcast guest, Scott Lackey, who's also a Christian leader, and we talked about stewardship. So if we come into leadership, we're there to serve. And you mentioned this before around how does a leader serve his people. Well, so yeah, we are given this gift of being able to steward, this gift to lead people. I believe the whole hierarchical system needs to be turned upside down, where the people doing the work are at the top and the leaders are at the bottom lifting them up, right? I think that whole thing needs to be flipped around.
I have that in my book. I actually have a pyramid, upside down pyramid in my book.
Well, there you
Because
go.
I can't agree with you more. Because again, yeah, if you have someone in the front line that doesn't show up to work, you feel it, right?
Yeah,
Like if you're running a restaurant and the cook doesn't show up or the server doesn't show up, you're in trouble. But if the CEO doesn't show up for 2 weeks, you don't even know. You don't notice, right? It's the people that are doing the work that are the most critical to getting the results. And yet those are the people that get treated the worst. They're the people that we don't go to and ask for their ideas or for their, right? We hire these fancy consultant groups to come in and help us with process improvements all the time. But the people that are doing the work, the people closest to the work, have all the answers. But they need to be engaged and happy and feel valued in order to give that energy, that information, those ideas up. And so that's the opportunity. And again, it doesn't
yeah,
cost money. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it does have to take a change of heart.
yeah, 100%. Here's an example. Back in 2023, I was working in a local government transport agency here in New Zealand, and we we brought Deloitte's in to help us build a strategy for data analytics. And so what they did is they interviewed the top level CEO and executives and to understand what the objectives were, what the outcomes they wanted. Then we had 60 workshops with 80 stakeholders who are doing the work, right? And we interviewed them and said, okay, what is it that you're interested in? What are you focused on? What the execs wanted and what the people wanted was two different things, because the people doing the work are operationally focused. They're focused on their work. They don't know how that links back to the strategy. So then we had to bring the two together and say, you're building a strategy. Your people don't know about that strategy. Your people are focused on operational. They need to understand how their work contributes to that. So I remember my role was to go out to the business, build a pipeline of work, bring that into the data analytics team and get it prioritized and ready for delivery. And so my teams would say to me, why are we doing this work? How does it contribute to the business goals, the outcomes, and the people of Auckland? and so on, because we're a local government. I went, okay, these guys don't really understand why they're doing this work. So then I started to bring the work in and say, this is what outcome it's going to deliver, and this is how it's going to impact the people of Auckland, right? And all of a sudden, the team doing the work could understand how they were contributing to the city, rather than rather than just doing meaningless robotic work. And so we just become an industrial age. We just become robots. And I'm glad that AI is here, because we can then offload some of that work to AI automation, and we can actually do the things that we love to do, and meaningful stuff that we like to do, right? Not
And more
boring,
human
repetitive
things.
stuff. Human things, because
Yeah.
AI is the best. AI will eat up, and automation will eat up repetitive work like it's no tomorrow. Yeah, absolutely. So what happens when a leader actually starts seeing them as human beings first, instead of like spreadsheets and numbers and
Yeah, they start to build that trust with that employee, and that relationship starts to build. And I think you mentioned earlier about the work that you were doing. Employees want to feel heard. They want to be in on things. There's certain things that motivate employees to want to give their all and to be engaged. And there is a perception gap sometimes with the higher level leaders and them thinking that what motivates employees is money and benefits and perks and things like that, when really it's not. But we have to go and, again, get to know your people and get to know. And here's the thing, this is the hardest part to me about leadership is, yes, everybody is priceless, and we need to see everybody first and foremost based on that label. But then the second part of it is getting to know everybody on an individual basis, because everybody's motivated a little bit differently and everyone likes to communicate a little bit differently, and everybody. So it's getting to know each person on that individual basis, and then being able to adapt your style and your communication as a servant leader. That's you're trying to meet them where they are. And to me, that's the hardest part, getting to know Anthony and how what makes you tick. And do you like to talk about your weekends when you start off on Monday morning, or do you not? And when's your prime time? When do you work the best? And what's most important to you? Is it the flexibility? And so getting to know all that information is so important. That's such valuable information, because then I can be a much better leader for you and serve you better. And then in return, again, you're going to feel so much better about being there and being an employee of that organization. And hopefully you're going to want to give more of yourself. And again, the results that come from that are just so much
yeah.
greater.
100%. I've just looked up Tony Robbins' six human. I think Tony Robbins talks about this, but the 6 human needs. One is certainty, so assurance you can avoid pain and gain pleasure, safety, and security. Number 2 is variety, need for the unknown, change, and new stimuli and adventure. Significance, they want to feel unique, valued, important, special, and needed. Fourth one is connection and love, right? It's a strong feeling of closeness, union. So being part of a team, or and then feeling loved and so on, and then growth, that you're actually expanding. The purpose we're here is to expand ourselves, right? And if we're kept small, then how do you expand? So it's the expansion of capacity, capability, and understanding. And the last one is contribution, where a sense of service, focus on helping, giving, and supporting others. So serving others, right? So those are all 6 human needs that people need. And if you're not getting that in an organization, then you're not actually, feeling fulfilled in your
Yeah,
purpose.
I think the biggest sign of success for a leader for me is, at the end of the day, did the people that you served as a leader, did they grow as a result of your leadership?
Yeah,
Did you help them grow? Did you help them develop? Did you help them in any way? Because again, results are important, but to me, this is far more important.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now you use a beautiful phrase, accountability with dignity. So what does that actually look like in a real world office or hospitality environment?
Yeah, what I found throughout my career was there's this false thought that there's only two ways to handle accountability. There's either you've got to do it through fear and intimidation, and kind of like my boss I mentioned earlier. He was really good about holding us accountable, but it was always like, it always made you feel sick inside, just the way that he handled it. Or the other way was to avoid it, because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. And so you just kind of let people kind of get away, or it's handled a little softly. There's a third option. And that's what we talk about is accountability with dignity. And I'm about to go and speak in Washington, D.C., in our capital, in a couple of weeks with our government leaders about this topic. And to me, it's you don't have to lower your standards, but you also don't have to give up someone's dignity and you can do so with respect. And to me, it's super easy, right? You stick with the facts and you share the observation of what you notice. You make sure the standard is well, clearly known. And then it's about offering your support and saying, finding out what's getting in your way of being able to meet that standard and what can I do to help support you. I had a leader that I worked with at one of my big resorts that I ran, and he came in as a chief engineer. He had a department of maintenance techs and engineers, and it was one of the worst departments in the resort. And I had just started, and he had just started. They had the worst engagement scores. They had the worst customer service scores for engineering. And he came in with this different philosophy and this different perspective. And he was definitely a servant leader. He just started having these coaching conversations, and he set this framework up about, listen, we're all going to do this together. We're one team, one dream. He called it one team love, I think he called it. And he was so passionate, and you knew just being around him that he cared about you and he wanted everybody to be successful, because he knew if everybody could be successful, then everybody won. He would win, the team would win, the company would win. And so the coaching became, hey, listen, let's get you trained. Let's make sure you have the right tools and you know what the standards are. And if you don't meet the standards, then we're going to say, hey, remember the standard. Help me understand what's getting in your way. What can I do to help make sure you can meet the standard moving forward? It was all very future focused, but the tone, the tenure, the culture of that team changed almost overnight. And it was all guys. They just got so excited to come in the morning. You could feel the energy and the results that came from that. All the scores went up. The guest scores, the engagement scores, turnover, again, went way down. And it was all because the way he came in and he approached not just accountability, but again, the way he saw his people, the way he treated his people. It was, again, there was several other leaders before him that had many more years experience than he, but had much worse results. And it was all because of the way he treated his people.
Yeah. How can we hold people to a high standard without losing the human connection?
Again, I think there's no reason why we ever need to handle any kind of coaching or performance conversation with any sort of frustration or with disrespect, because I think that's what I think sometimes when we give feedback as a leader, it's out of frustration, or you made me look foolish, so now I'm mad and I take it out on you. Those are the scenarios where accountability doesn't feel good. And when those conversations happen, we do more damage than we do good, right? Yes,
Yeah.
we get it out and we make it known that you screwed up. But again, the story that I tell myself is I screwed up. And now I start beating myself up, or gosh, I really don't like this place. I don't like this guy, or right, I got to find a new job. And so the stories that we start to tell ourselves become very negative, and the feelings that come, the emotions that stem from those stories are negative, and those feelings drive our performance. And so at the end of the day, now I'm making even more mistakes, or I'm coming in late, or I'm going to call off sick, or it really has a complete opposite effect of what we're trying to do when we don't handle those conversations well.
Yeah. So it comes down to responsibility for yourself, because you're effectively creating your own reality by your thoughts that you're thinking, your emotions, and then taking the actions that you're taking. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this. He says your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions create your current reality. So
And
if you're a
knowing that as a
leader,
leader, yeah,
yeah,
everything you say, everything you do, every decision you make, that person is going to tell a story about that. Right. And we want to make sure that those stories are positive stories. And that's the best way. And the beautiful thing is you have such an opportunity to make positive stories, positive ripple effects in people's lives. Right. You just have to focus on it and be conscious about those efforts, but know that every time someone leaves your presence, they're telling themselves a story. So ask yourself, is that a positive story that person is telling themselves, or is it not? And again, we're not looking for perfection here, but it's all about intent and trying to do better, each and every time we have these
yeah.
conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, intention. Yeah. And I was just, as I mentioned before, I was having a chat with Jim Britt, who worked with Jim Rowan and Tony Robbins and so on. And we talked about intention exactly in the same way. The other thing I was going to say was that for humans, yes, you might say a word, but it's the feeling and the experience that you give them, right? And like you said, you create stories from that, narratives that then you take forward with you, and it's going to change the way you behave, and your attitude and your behavior as well. So I like to say, like, our thoughts, as you know, and even in the biblical sense, is, your words have power, right?
Mhm.
And the words that you say, you're sowing seeds, right, into the universe. But I also like to think of it in this analogy that your body is your soil, and you're sowing seeds by the words you speak into your soil, and then your emotions is what you're feeding it. It's the fertilizer and stuff like that. So you got to ask yourself, by the way I'm saying and my emotions, what kind of garden am I growing?
I love that.
Because your
Yeah, I love that.
mind
Yeah,
goes through your nervous system, right? And it's your mind, your body is a garden.
yeah.
But what are you sowing in there? What are you growing?
I love that. And we do this exercise in our one of our workshops where we ask people to think about a time when a leader made them feel either priceless or worthless in their life. And we just have them write down a sentence or two what that leader said or did that made them feel that way. And then we walk around and we read the stories and we ask them to share a little bit more. But my favorite question to ask is, "Hey, when did this happen in your life?" And it's fascinating. Sometimes it's 10, 15, 20 years ago that something a leader said has left that kind of mark on you. And so, yeah, this influence that we have on people, yes, we said it in the moment, but know that it could stick with someone for 10, 20, 30 years and have that kind of impact.
Yeah,
So let's make them positive. That's the opportunity. Let's have some
exactly.
positive influence on people.
Yeah, we often, like, if you take the word mistake, and we often beat ourselves up and we go, "Oh, I stuffed up. I made a mistake," right? But I remember back in 2004, a manager of mine said to me, "Anthony, do you know what a mistake is?" And I said, "That's bad. That's a bad thing." And he said, "No, no, no. You know when you make a movie?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, you have a lot of mistakes, but eventually you get the right take and you make a multi-million-dollar movie." And since that day, a mistake is no longer a bad thing for me, because I've held on to that thinking of, it's actually a positive thing. If I fail quicker and make more mistakes, I'm going to learn from it and be able to do something better.
Yeah, it's a gift. I think mistakes are often a gift. That's how we learn, right? That's how we grow.
Yeah,
I
100%.
think the biggest mistake we can make as leaders is not recognizing the impact that we have on people. And the thing that I know some of my biggest failures as a leader have been when I haven't been paying attention. And I have said things or done things that have had a negative impact on people on my team. And I just haven't been paying attention. And the employees walk around, they don't say anything, but it's inside them. And they walk around and it festers and it builds and it builds and it builds. And so I've learned that you really have to pay attention, especially to the unspoken words, and really pay attention to the body language. And again, the more you get to know people, you know when they're having an off day or they're not. They say everything's fine, but it's not fine. And really digging because we want to get those stories out. Because if I made a mistake or if I said something that left that kind of mark on you, I want to try to get that resolved so that it's not going to stick with you for 20 years from now. So I think that really, to me, that's the biggest mistake that I made as a leader. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, Scott. Now come back to this present moment where there's a lot of change happening with AI and automation,
yeah.
right? It's moving so quickly, so fast. How does the role of a leader need to change to stay relevant in this current
It's
environment?
happening fast. It is happening fast. I think for decades and decades and decades, leaders have been valued a lot for their knowledge, for what they know. And AI is kind of is replacing that, right? Because we have an abundance of knowledge. I don't think we need any more knowledge. So what we do need though is more humanity. And I think the future for leaders is going to belong to those who are going to learn how to connect the best with others. So knowing that again, employees are carrying so much stress with them right now, probably more than ever because of everything that's going on, even with AI and the threat that it has on their job or the value even that they have as an employee and all the things going on in the world. And so people need people now more than ever. The good thing that I love about AI is we mentioned it earlier, it's giving us time back. It's able to do a lot of that administrative work, a lot of the redundant work, a lot of even the analysis and a lot of the stuff that for years kept us in the office. I've been doing executive coaching for a long time. And anytime I would bring up, hey, we need to do more coaching, more mentoring, more team building, I always got the, yeah, I agree, but I don't have the time, Scott. Now that excuse goes away. What AI does is it gives us a choice, though. It doesn't mean we have to make that choice to spend that time connecting with our people and spending that time developing and growing and inspiring. But let the humans do what humans only can do and let the computers do what the computers do. I think that's probably our biggest opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Scott, you've seen what I've built with AI on the
Yeah, it's
Champion Mindset
incredible.
Collective, right? And up until 6 months ago, everything was manual, and I was taking a whole day to edit and publish and do everything. I don't have a team of people. I was doing everything manually, and then I systemized it. As of this morning, I have 65 guests in my pipeline that are in motion. Either they've been recorded or they're waiting to be approved, and some of them are approved, they're waiting to be booked. To manage all of that via email and go back and forth, could you imagine the amount of energy and the brain space and stuff it takes, right? And to then make sure that you've emailed the right people and so on. So ended up building a guest management system that runs automatically. I send a link out, people fill out the form, it automatically comes in, and all that information gets repurposed for the show notes and for the episode page and everything. So, and now what I'm looking at doing is helping other podcasters and creators and entrepreneurs systemize and do the same thing. Yeah. So yeah, AI has a lot of advantages. But do you feel like we are starting to get more disconnected? Are you worried about how people are going to get disconnected in the workplace?
I'm only worried if we don't use that time wisely. I am worried that anytime we get time back, it's very easy for it to just fill it in with non-value added activity. And so that's my only worry. I think that there's a huge positive opportunity though to get, and I've been working with clients with AI talking about this topic, and there's a lot of cases where people are getting like 20 hours or more back a week because of these tools, these co-pilot tools and all these new advances in technology. The key again is what are we doing with those 20 hours? And to me, for executives, for example, they need to be getting out of their office more, getting down on the floor, finding out what the reality is of what's going on in their own business. And then also they spending that time to focus on putting the people first. What do the people need to so that we can help them be successful? And then for leaders, it is about getting out and getting to know your people and connecting. And to me, it excites me. But if you don't use that time, it's a choice. And if you don't use it, then yeah, I think we do run the risk of it becoming very dehumanized, and it's going to just get worse.
For those people who are getting the benefits of from AI, what is the sentiment? What are you when you're talking to them? What are they saying to you?
But they're excited. The ones that use it are excited because they're able to do more creative work, or they're able to, again, I think get rid of some of that repetitive, boring work that frees them up to do more creative stuff or to spend time with the people. I think some of the frustration has been coming from executives specifically on the lack of adoption of some of these AI tools because they are investing a lot of time and resources and money on these tools and people are not using them or they're not using them for their intended purposes. And in fact, I think there's some studies that show there's like an 80 to 90% failure rate in some of these AI adoption for these tools. And I will tell you, it's not the technology. It's not perfect, obviously, but to me, it's a change management issue, not a tech issue. And I think one of the biggest opportunities for organizations is to not look at it as an IT project. And I think that's what a lot of companies, at least here in the US, how they've been handling it is this is an IT. Let's put a project plan together. Let's roll this out. And they haven't thought about the human element of change and the resistance that's coming from people who are either afraid of it or they are thinking it's going to replace them. And so as a result, yes, people are going to fight it, or they'll use it a little bit and then they'll go back to their old ways. And if you want to get adoption, then you need to approach it very differently. And it's got to be in a much more positive light. Instead of, hey, you need to learn this or you're going to become obsolete, or we're going to bring someone else in who will use it. It's about saying, hey, this is exciting. Let's come together. And as a community, all of us are going to upskill and learn this together and figure out how to use this to again, free us all up to be able to do better work and make it a much more positive experience.
Yeah, my understanding and belief is that, and I'm working in the AI space myself. I have my business AI workflows agency, and clients come to me and they say, "What tool should I use?" And I say, "Not having that conversation with you." And they go, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, because there's lots of generic tools out there. They're not going to help you. What you've got to do is understand who you are, what your vision is for your business, why you created this business, and the tool should support what you do." So I feel that gone are the days where those SaaS products, those software as a service products that are just generic, that businesses roll out and expect everything to just cookie cutter fit in. It doesn't work that way because every business is different. And And in theory, it could work, but practically, each business functions differently, just like every human is different.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
and your business is a reflection of who you are, right? And your tasks that you do, everything is a reflection of what energy you put into it, how you do it. So I feel that it's changing, but that where businesses can actually start to develop their own custom products and AI tools that are going to help their people. Now, you don't just go out on a tangent and build that yourself and then get your team to use it. Like you said before, you could do like a 90-day sprint where everyone, including the leaders, are part of that. And you get together and you collaborate and you synthesize exactly what is it that you want, what is going to help the business move forward. You come up with those ideas and then you start to then build that out. And in 90 days, it's surprising what you could build, because what you've seen me build, I've built in over 5 months. But what I do now is I come up with an idea, I ideate it, and I build it, and it takes me 10 minutes to build something, anything. If I've got the idea, I can build it within less than 30 minutes.
But you need to come
And
up with the idea. The human's got to come up with the idea.
so creativity, critical thinking, and then you can
And
develop.
you have a tool. Yeah.
Yeah. But then if you've got a team of people that have all got different views, you could end up with a spaghetti sort of solution. So then you've got to come to a common goal and make sure that if you're building something for an organization, that you're taking into account that the sales teams, the marketing teams, the operations teams, everything is also thought about and part of that process as well. So, yeah. So, how can leaders use the period of change to actually double down on being more human?
I think this is the time. This is the time for, I call it like the great reset, where I think they can take this time to gather their teams together and have this conversation. I think employees are looking for this conversation right now, because at least where we are, the AI conversation and there's so much unknown about what the future is going to look like at work. What is going to happen to my job with all these new tools? And again, it's not even just work, but it's what's going on in the world. And so there is a lot of unknown. So I think people need that reassurance. They're looking for that. And I think this is the time where leaders can come and say, we need a different type of leadership right now. People are looking for it. I think we need to look at, like, if you look at the best practices for change management, I think it starts with looking at how we communicate, the communication planning, and all the things that go in that, as far as involving employees and not just rolling something out and telling them about it or trying to convince them about the benefits, and or trying to install fear, but really is engaging people in that process. Because when people are engaged in the process, then the buy-in is so much easier to get, because people feel like they were part of that process, and they feel like even if it's not what they wanted or it wasn't their idea, at least they felt like they had an opportunity to have some input or to ask questions at least. That's, to me, that's the key. It's, again, treat this like a change management, a culture shift more than a tech shift. To me, that's the key.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Now, for someone listening and they're feeling lost, and they've lost their way in the team, with their team, how do they start building the trust back?
I would not start with looking at the team. I would start by looking in the mirror at themselves, because leadership always starts with yourself. And that's where I think the biggest opportunity when we talk about perspective is starting with, what is your perspective on your role as a leader? Are you thinking of yourself as, I'm the leader, I'm in charge, they work for me? Or are you looking at leadership as, my job is to serve those entrusted into my care? My
Stewardship.
job is to go in every day and make sure that my team has everything that they need to succeed. My job is to go in and remove barriers and to make sure that I know everybody and their story. That's the first step, is to really challenge yourself to change that perspective, knowing that you're going to yield much, much, much greater results when you can lead in that fashion versus, thinking that, people are going to work for you, and that whole command and control style of leadership. The second part would then again be to challenge yourself to pause. When you look at every employee that walks in your office, pause and ask yourself, what label am I putting on this person? What is that label? And challenge yourself, because once you understand what that label is, you will be able to reflect back and recognize, oh, that's why I treat this person this way, right? That person that I never give any extra assignments to or no recognition to, it may be because I see them as, right, an underperformer, or the person that gets all the recognition on my team is because I see them as the high performer. Change that label, right? See everybody as that priceless human being with with untapped potential, immeasurable worth, and right, and separate the performance, separate the behavior, separate every other factor from their worth, and you will start to treat people differently. And to me, that would be my first step if I was to give advice for people that feel stuck. Start by looking at yourself, challenge how you see yourself as a leader, and then start looking at people differently. And to me, that is your starting point.
Yeah. And how does focusing on others in this way help a leader with their own resilience and mindset?
This is the most valuable exercise that I have found, not just as a leader, but as a human being. I practice this in my personal life, like in traffic or at the airport or in the mall. And so I think once leaders start to practice this, they will find themselves practicing this or trying it out in their real life. And so this spills into their home life. And ideally, it will spill out into communities as well. I'll tell you, when someone cuts me off in traffic now, the first thing I say is that person who just cut me off in traffic is priceless. I don't know what's going on in their life. They might be trying to get to the hospital because someone is going into labor. I don't know, right? I don't have to like the fact that they cut me off in traffic. But what it does for me is it calms me down. Like physically, I feel myself being a lot more calm than if I allow those thoughts in my head to control me. And for those thoughts to be like, oh, that jerk who just cut me off, they almost killed me, bop, bop, bop. Because those thoughts create anger, which lead to that road rage, that leads to things that I'm going to regret. So I think practicing this really does help, even again, just for myself, to keep me more kind of calm and zen and much more peaceful as a human being.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we can all learn
Yeah.
to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, Scott, people have been listening to this episode, if they've got this far and they're going, I'm a leader or I'm part of a team and I want to hear more about this. Scott, how can they get in touch with you? Also, what have you got on offer at the moment? And you've written I think you've written books, yes? So how
Yeah.
can they get hold of your books?
Yeah. We try to keep everything super simple. So everything you can find on our website, which is nationalald.com. And we have workshops and executive retreats and train the trainer certifications. And again, we're really trying to lead a national movement, really international movement, to try to bring this humanity into the workplace in this day and age when AI is coming in. We're really trying to help organizations do that reset, look at leadership differently, create a people first culture. And so we've got an amazing faculty of people that are just leadership gurus. A lot of the faculty on our staff have TED Talks and books, and they're just incredibly talented individuals that are just passionate about our movement. We don't charge a lot of money. We're not trying to make millions. We really are just trying to inspire a different style of leadership. So nationalald.com. We have a free assessment tool. We have a great, like a servant leadership assessment tool where you can find out what kind of archetype leader you are, and it gives you some ideas for some growth opportunities and strengths. And so if you go to nationalald.com/assessment, that's a free tool that you can access through the website.
100%. Okay, we'll put some of the information in the show notes, and then you'll get a dedicated page for this episode on the Champion Mindset Collective Hub. And on that page, there'll be your details, your bio, your contact details. There'll be the link to the website as well. And there'll be an article, a practical guide, which will distill down to a 3-page guide that people can download after this episode is published.
So cool. What you've built is incredible.
Yeah.
It really
And
is.
yeah, the idea is that someone listens to this episode, they may not remember everything. They go and read the article and they go, well, how do I apply this in my life? Well, then download the guide, which is 3 pages, and it takes you through a whole lot of the challenges, the concepts, the key takeaways. It gives you reflection points and it gives you practical steps that you can take in your journey. So all of that will be on that page. The videos, you don't even have to leave the page to go and watch the videos because the videos are there. And Scott, you can also view the stats of your videos on there. So whenever the stats are starting to sort of go down, you just could give it a bit of a nudge on your side as well.
Nice.
And it also shows you across the other platforms what's happening with the episodes as well and the video. So yeah, I've put a lot of work in there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is all of this information plus every other episode I've ever done goes into a knowledge base where the champion coach on the front of the website, you can chat with it, it will coach you, it will get context. And its job is not to give you advice, but its job is to serve you with resources and more content that you can listen to and help you. So there may be synergies with other other guests who have spoken about similar things that they'll be able to serve up with as well.
So I have no doubt that you could have invented, created all of that without AI, but it probably would have taken you about 7 or 8 years. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
And the idea or the thought was there 3 years ago. So the use of AI just helped me.
that's it. It's a
Um,
tool. It's an amazing tool. Yeah.
yeah, and also we're launching the Champion Academy as well. So if you're going through transitions in your life, then there's courses. I'll talk about this shortly in the outro. Yeah, look, there's so much content, so much information available on the Champion Mindset Collective. If you're watching this, listening to this, I'd encourage you to go there and have a look, because I'm committed to this movement and everyone becoming a champion in their life. We often think that a champion is someone who is in sports, but no, they're just a human being doing something, right? So every human being has greatness within them, and they can be a champion. What I've created actually was inspired by Lewis Howes and also the Greatness Mindset and also by Mind Valley. And I actually reached out on a post from Vishen Lakiani from Mind Valley and said, hey, look, I've built this platform. And he said, it's so great that you've taken your struggle and created a platform to help others. So there you go. All right, now we're at the quickfire round, so I've got 6 very quick questions for you. You can answer these in a short sentence or a single word. And the
Okay.
first question for you is, how do you define success, and has that definition evolved for you over time?
It has evolved. I used to equate that with either a title or awards, and now I definitely equate it to helping people see their worth and potential, and also just being the person God created me to be.
Who's been your greatest inspiration and why?
Might be cliche, but Jesus has been my biggest inspiration, not just because of my faith, but because he really elevated the value of people more than anyone else.
What is something that you believe that others may disagree with?
I do not like the phrase that when people say that people are our greatest asset in an organization, you'd think I'd like that. I don't like it because people aren't assets. People are human beings. And I would say that people are the heart of the organization. That's what I would say.
100%. People create culture, not the other way around. Yeah. If you could go back and give young Scott some advice, what would it be?
Stop trying to prove your value and help others discover theirs.
Yeah, 100%. What is one message that you'd like to share with the world?
It's definitely that every person has immeasurable worth and that untapped potential. And I think that leadership is really about being able to see both of those things in people. I was going to just say one thing because you shared your story with me. You mentioned it earlier. And I just wanted to make sure before I hang up with you that somebody in this world has said to you that these 3 words, I'm proud of you because you have overcome so much in your life and to be where you're at, to accomplish what you've accomplished. And I know your story, so I don't know if anybody's said that to you before, but I am proud of you. And I just wanted to say that to you.
Thank you. I'm proud of myself as well
Good,
for coming this far.
good.
And I'm looking forward to the journey ahead because it's only upwards. It might have a few speed bumps along the way,
Yeah,
but
always. Yeah,
it's the trajectory is
it's part of
upwards.
the journey.
You just springboard from. I believe it's like the speed bumps just help you springboard up to the next level. Yeah. What does it mean to you to be a champion and have a champion mindset?
For me, a champion is not about being the best or beating everybody, but it's really about helping others become the best version of themselves. Because I think when we do that, everybody wins, including the
Yeah,
organization.
100%.
So to me, that's what it's all about.
Agree. Now, I'm going to ask you one more question, and this is something that I just started doing in the last few episodes. Is what is your favorite mindset quote?
My favorite quote is to get more out of people, treat your people better. I don't know that's the exact quote, but that's, well, I don't even know. But it's just, it's the kind of the essence of my message to executives, to leaders everywhere is like, just stop overcomplicating. If you want to get more out of people, take care of your people better. Do you know Mr. Rogers?
I've heard the name.
Okay. He was a kids' TV show host here when I was a kid. He's the one that said, it's hard not to love people once you get to know their story. And that's the other quote that really stuck with me that I use all
Yeah,
the time. So I like that one.
cool. Awesome. Thank you, Scott. This has been such a grounding conversation. It's the biggest takeaway for me is that the idea of accountability with dignity. It's a reminder that you don't choose between high performance and being a good human. You can do both. So, Scott, thank you for sharing your heart and your wisdom with us today. If you've been watching this episode and you found this helpful, please hit the subscribe button. It would be just down there. And share this episode with someone like a leader or someone who is wanting to be a leader who needs to hear this message. You can find all of Scott's work in the show notes. If you're wanting to learn more about the AI space, I have a clarity assessment that I'm taking business leaders through. Book that. Also, if you are going through some sort of transition in your life, whether it's restructure, the Champion Academy there's a course there which is I think it's something like 35 weeks, and I take you through each week a number of different lessons that then helps you move forward. You're supported. You don't have to do this on your own. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Champion Mindset Collective. Lastly, I just want to say you are loved, you are worthy, champion your life, champion your greatness, and have an amazing day.